Welcome back to Hardball. George Zimmerman charged tonight with second-degree murder in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. Just a few moments ago, Mark O'Mara, the new attorney for George Zimmerman, Mark O'Mara spoke with reporters. Let's listen to a bit of what he said at the top of his news conference.
I think he's troubled by the fact that the state decided to charge him, but I've talked to him about the process. The prosecutor knows the evidence much better than I do right now. She's professional. She's doing a job as a prosecutor. She's made a decision, and now we'll see what the next step brings. I think anyone who would be charged with second-degree murder would be scared. So yes, I'm certain he's frightened. He's in police custody, and they are doing what they can to get him to Seminole County.
Where was he, Mark? Call you?
We voluntarily surrendered him to law enforcement with the realization that the charges were going to come, and he did that again voluntarily. And we're trying to work out the best way to keep this as calm as we can.
Was he out of state?
How did you become his attorney?
The family contacted me. I think there were referrals from other lawyers, and I talked to Mr. Zimmerman.
FDLE or Jacksonville? Which law enforcement?
I believe it was FDLE, yes.
Have you ever had a stand your ground case before?
30 years of practice. The stand your ground statute, I think, was 2005. The idea of having self-defense cases, yes, I've done several death penalty cases, a bunch of murder cases, and self-defense is in many of them a part of the defense, possibly, so yes.
Mark, based on what you know about the facts, how are you going to make the case that this was a justified homicide?
I don't know yet. I have no idea. Commenting on the evidence is not really appropriate anyway, but it's easier for me to say I'm not going to comment on it because I know nothing more than you.
What did Zimmerman say to you, Mark? What did Zimmerman say to you?
Well, he's concerned about getting a fair trial and a fair presentation. There's obviously been a lot of information flowing. I think a lot of it's been both premature and maybe inappropriate. I don't think a case like this should be tried here, and it's not going to be. I don't think the prosecutor is going to try it before cameras, and I'm very glad to hear that. But there's a lot of information, and of course there's a lot of groundswell of emotions on all sides of the issue. The statute and whether or not it's appropriate, Trayvon Martin's untimely death, Mr. Zimmerman. So there's a lot of issues and there's a lot of emotions, and we need to calm this down. It needs to be tried in a courtroom, which is the only place it's supposed to be tried, and that's what I'm going to help try to get done.
Mark, what happened with the last attorneys? What made you want to take this case?
It's what I do. I mean, I've done it for a long, long time. I think I'm pretty good at it. I hope to be good at it. And Mr. Zimmerman needs a very good and focused defense, so we're going to build him one.
Is that why he stopped calling his former attorneys?
I'm sorry?
Is that why he stopped calling his former attorneys?
I didn't talk to him about how that occurred or what happened with that.
Were you on before or after that news conference yesterday where his legal advisors
It would definitely have been after.
After that news
Absolutely.
conference? Did he mention that to you, that he needed new counsel after that?
We didn't talk about that.
Mark, can you tell us what city he's in?
This case has so much attention. How can you keep him safe?
I'm hoping that law enforcement is going to do what they can to assist me in keeping him safe. I'm hoping that the community will calm down. We now have a process in place. It's a very good process, best in the world, and it works pretty well. We have to let it work. We have to understand and have faith in the justice system. Nobody, after all, wanted Trayvon Martin to be prejudged as he was walking down that street. I asked not to prejudge George Zimmerman, and please do not prejudge the criminal justice system. It's going to work. We just need to let it work.
Are you aware of how much your life's going to change? How much is your life going to change?
I understand the undertaking. It's going to be challenging, and I've handled other high-profile cases of sorts. I'll deal with it. I hope to have a good support team with me, and I hope that I'll be given the time to do it, and we won't have to have many of these.
Did you contact him through his website?
I'm sorry?
Did you contact him through his website?
Absolutely not. I did not contact him at all, which would be unethical to contact a lawyer, a client for representation. And no, I haven't even seen the website, to be honest with you.
What city did he turn himself in?
I really don't want to disclose that.
Was it in Central Florida?
And where was he before today? Everyone's been wondering where he was.
I don't know.
Mark, what are the conditions of bond you're hoping the judge grants? Are you going to, given the sensitivity in the community, are you going to see if he can be let out of Seminole County or let out of Florida?
My hope is that the judge will grant a bond, and that'll be a bond that the family can make. They are not a family of means, so that's going to be difficult to begin with. And that normally the conditions are that you stay local. I think that may be difficult. I think that nobody would deny the fact that if George Zimmerman was walking down the street today, he would be at risk. And that's just a reality. That's just the way things are right now. So we need to protect him. And I'm hoping that the judge will understand that. I'm certain the prosecutor understands that. I'm hoping law enforcement will give us the assistance that we're going to need in this case. But I'm hoping that we're going to keep him safe. I want him to get to his trial so that a judge or jury or the prosecutor can figure out a way to resolve this.
Mark, will he have to appear tomorrow?
Do you think you can get a fair trial here?
We wouldn't today, I don't think. The emotions are just running high in all of Central Florida. But we'll see as we get closer to the point where we're resolving it. We don't even know if we're going to have a trial.
What's going to happen tomorrow in the Seminole County courtroom?
My hope, if I can get back in my office and finish the work, that we're going to have a bond motion hearing set by a judge. An initial appearance will be held, and at that point the judge can consider what to do with the then existing bond schedule of no bond, which is what Seminole County has as a bond schedule for second-degree murder, and that we can convince him or her that a bond is appropriate.
What time is the hearing? Do you know when
it's not set yet. I think that
time at 1:30 when they normally
it may be at 9 o'clock, maybe at 1:30. I do not know that yet. We'll know that in the morning.
Mark, his former attorneys made him sound a little frantic. How did he sound to you? How was his voice?
He is troubled by everything that has happened. And I could not imagine living in George Zimmerman's shoes for the past number of weeks. It's only because he has sort of been at the focus of a lot of anger and maybe confusion and maybe some hatred. And that's got to be difficult. I mean, truly, it must be frightening to not be able to go into a 7-Eleven or into a store and literally to be, in effect, a prisoner in wherever he was. So that would trouble all of us, and I'm sure that he's wearing some of the fallout from that.
Well, that's Mark O'Mara, the new defense attorney for George Zimmerman. He just there at a press conference. With me now is David Weinstein, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida and a former assistant state attorney at the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office. Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, is also with us, and Kendall Coffey, a former U.S. attorney, are joining us right now. David, let's go right now to David on this thought. What did you make of that performance there by the new defense attorney?
I think he was fantastic. He covered all the bases that he needed to do. He made sure to feel confident about himself, about his client, and about allowing this case to be tried in a court of law and not tried out in the press. Mr.
Coffey, your view of what you just heard there?
I think he set the right tone, and this is going to very quickly shift now, because yesterday we were focusing on the defense lawyers, but now there's a case, there's charges, and as this thing goes forward, most all of what we've been talking about in the press becomes much, much less important. Now it's the legal proceedings. Will he, for example, be out on bond? That's a big question. Could it be house arrest? If so, what house could it be? And then, of course, a very big question as to how and when the defense will attempt to invoke the stand your ground law. Because remember, unlike other kinds of defenses, they can proactively put this forward and ask a judge to throw out the whole case if they can establish the self-defense under stand your ground by preponderance of the evidence.
Mayor Brown, it seemed like the defense attorney there, Mr. O'Mara, who I don't know, was very open there in saying there are options here. One is he may not go to trial, his client. The other is the prosecutors and he may reach an agreement, some sort of plea bargain that may keep this from a jury. Or, of course, the judge in this preliminary hearing on stand your ground might decide to dismiss the charges right then.
He was very, very careful in all of his comments to stay within the framework of what the possibilities are. And he did so without in any fashion inflaming the people who may disagree with him. I thought he did a marvelous job, a manageable job, and I think he has a very difficult situation. He did not attempt to dramatize it at all, and nor did he engage in any hype. He did a good job.
Let me get back to Kendall Coffey. Sir, let me ask you about the media role in all this. I mean, there's no doubt that it has played a role in rising the heat level, which perhaps will lead to some light, but the perhaps phrase is very important here. Now we have, since we have an indictment here, we have a prosecution in effect. The presumption of innocence is going to be honored, I believe, on the airwaves. I certainly hope it is. It will be by me. The presumption of innocence is key in any way we cover a trial. Do you think that's going to change the tenor of the way the heat level is affecting this case as it proceeds to court?
Well, I think it's still going to be a very emotional case because we've got issues that are not only about the earlier questions of race, whether African-American victims get the same level of validation from the criminal justice system. Today, with a second-degree murder charge, you've seen plenty of validation. But also, I think the stand your ground law is itself going to be on trial. And that's not going to go away as a catalyst for plenty of debate and plenty of controversy.
They can't both be on trial at the same time. If it is the law, as the new attorney Mark O'Mara brought up, it can be used in the defense. You can push for appeal in the legislature. By the way, you're not going to get it in this legislature. It's a Republican one and probably a very conservative one. So why is it relevant to talk about the law, whether it's a good law or not, if it is the law?
Well, I think what's relevant is the fact that this particular law is something that invites a defendant to come up with self-serving explanations for why he shot a victim. And sometimes those self-serving explanations are baloney. But since the only person that could have contradicted them is lying down dead, defenses have been made and people have been getting away with it sometimes.
Chris,
let me go to Mr. Weinstein on this. I just want to go back to that question. Every time there's an accusation of murder, the dead person doesn't get to join in debate. I mean, everybody keeps bringing this up, and I understand why, with total sympathy, as I share, for the victim here. It's always the case in a murder case that the victim can't talk in court.
The victim is going to talk through the assistant state attorney in the courtroom. He's going to talk through the crime scene examiner. He's going to talk through the evidence that's introduced. The victim will get a chance to talk and present his case through those people and through their voices. But you have to remember, I want to go back to a couple of things we were talking about here. Stand your ground is never going to go away for George Zimmerman. It is the law as it exists at the time that this crime was committed. You cannot remove that from him. That will always exist. That will always be there. And if they get past it and they do end up in court, then he also has a self-defense and justifiable use of deadly force that's going to come up and come before the jury. This is long from over, and there used to be a saying, things are different in Florida. You have to remember that in the state court system, this is all going to be observed for everyone to see. Cameras are allowed in the courtroom. There is a discovery process here whereby the defense, if they invoke discovery, is entitled to take deposition testimony pre-trial of the witnesses who would come forward and testify in this case. Those then become public record. Those are then accessible by everybody that wants to take a look at it. I think the bigger problem is going to be, if this case proceeds to trial, how are we going to find a fair and impartial jury for this man to stand trial?
Mayor Brown, I interrupted you. Do you want to have a last thought here? We're running out of time in this segment.
We also must keep in mind that there's still a federal investigation going on. It was not an isolated act that the Attorney General of the United States of America said. In looking at this case, he's looking at it from the perspective of whether or not there have been any violations of the equal protection clauses and all the things associated with what happens in cases of this nature with reference to race. And so there's it's out there, and it will be addressed.
And it may well should be, because you have a real question here is why the initial state's attorney did not take any action except to release the man that night. There was no further investigation. In fact, I questioned, as a citizen, the way in which they looked at the whole question of Trayvon Martin and the way this body was just put in a locker, a freezer for the couple of days there without any real interest, it seemed, in this guy being a total innocent. Anyway, thank you, David Weinstein. Thank you, Mayor Brown, as always, sir. And thank you, Kendall Coffey. We'll be having you all back again many, many days ahead. Coming up, the heat that led to the light, hopefully, and how protests day after day really did force the prosecutor to reconsider this case, and the charges against Zimmerman may have come from that. The charge now of second-degree murder. You're watching Hardball, only on MSNBC.